Now, the UN General Assembly has adopted a resolution demanding Russia immediately withdraw from Ukraine. 141 out of 193 member states voted for the non-binding resolution. We've got our correspondent, William Denslow, in New York, who joins us now, who was watching these proceedings. William, thank you very much for your time. Talk us through the overall sense of how that voting went.
Well, we heard speeches before this vote for more than 2 days here in New York at the General Assembly Hall. It is a significant vote. It's the first time that the General Assembly has had this kind of emergency session in some 40 years, only the 11th time the General Assembly has voted in this manner. So it is significant, although it is a non-binding resolution. Now, we heard a number of nations express their condemnation towards Moscow's action. We heard from the US ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, who came out and said that a vote in favour of the resolution condemning Russia's aggression was simple. She said that it was a vote. She urged the international community to vote yes if you respect the sovereignty and sovereign integrity of Ukraine, to vote yes if you want to condemn and hold Russia to account, and vote yes if you uphold the principles of the UN Charter. We also heard from Ukraine's UN ambassador, who urged the international community and urged them to be united, and warned them that if you look 40 years ago, it was on that generation you'd have hoped to put the notion of huge wars behind us. He now says that importance and that responsibility to stop another world war is essentially on this generation, and urging the international community to take action to condemn Russia. Of course, it wasn't a united vote. As you mentioned, 141 nations in favour. There were 5 against, including the likes of Belarus and Russia, with some 35 abstentions too.
Absolutely. Now, one interesting thing, or very unsurprisingly for us here in South Africa who've been listening to government's pronouncements on what's currently happening between the two countries, South Africa chose to abstain from this vote. I mean, just talk us through that particular element of those proceedings.
Well, of course, there have been huge concerns when it comes to the treatment of those from the African diaspora, especially trying to leave Ukraine, which will certainly be of grave concern for everyone at the international community, especially those African nations that cast their votes here in New York on Wednesday. It's believed that more than 20 African nations did vote in favour of the resolution. However, as you mentioned, one of those, though, that didn't take that decision and chose to abstain was South Africa. We heard from South Africa's ambassador to the UN that said that essentially South Africa's position was because they wanted more of an open and transparent process at the General Assembly. Let's have a listen.
The resolution that we have considered today does not create an environment conducive for diplomacy, dialogue and mediation. While we agree with and support the efforts taken by member states to bring to the attention of the international community the situation in Ukraine, South Africa feels that greater attention should have been paid to bringing the sides closer to dialogue.
Now, William, you have mentioned that the resolution is not binding, and so Russia is not going to be compelled to take any kind of action in the direction of this resolution. But I do suppose that countries will continue this international isolation in the form of sanctions and the like until Russia acts accordingly.
Absolutely. This is certainly seen as a symbolic vote, even though it doesn't have the teeth that something like a UN Security Council vote would have. Of course, at the Security Council, Russia is a veto-wielding member. At this General Assembly forum, there is no veto, which is why after a Security Council veto was seen a few days ago, we saw the rest of the international community and the rest of the Security Council decide to take these steps to put this resolution to a vote at the General Assembly. Of course, as you so rightly mentioned, this is all about showing to Russia that there is a unified response from much of the international community. Of course, we've seen this very much being a key argument we've heard from the likes of the US as well as its European powers to say that while there might not be action at the Security Council, what we've seen is that the likes of the US, the European Union, have been essentially in lockstep when it comes to their coordinated sanctions response, and that letting Moscow know that their actions in Ukraine will be met with dire and coordinated responses from the likes of the US and its allies.
Yeah, and we would have liked to hear that kind of pronouncement from huge economies, the world's second biggest economy, China, for example, who say they will not initiate any sanctions. And it's quite unfortunate because it's the kind of might of the sanctions that would really push Russia to the brink. And we're just not going to get that apart from those who've said they will continue with the direction that they've taken.
Yeah, we heard from Zhang Jun, who's the Chinese ambassador to the United Nations, who laid out why China was one of those countries to abstain from this vote. That wasn't surprising by any stretch of the imagination. China, along with India and the UAE, were the three countries when the Security Council voted on a similar resolution a few days ago. They abstained, as well as Russia, of course, voting against it and using their power of a veto. What we've heard, and what we've heard time and time again from Chinese representatives at the UN, is clear. They believe that this kind of action, these kind of resolutions are unhelpful. They believe that mediation must be the way forward, diplomacy, and to see it de-escalate. Their message has been that this kind of action at the UN ramps up pressure. But of course, there is a degree of frustration, especially in Washington, when it comes to China's response. President Biden quizzed by reporters again on Wednesday about whether he's spoken to China, whether he can get them to be more involved. The United States has been somewhat tight-lipped on that, but of course, when it comes to this global cooperation, having China very much being a part of that would be a huge help as far as the US and its allies are concerned.